and try to...
Which story? About you or about Hasidus?
Oh, I see. No. I said I was going to tell Hasidic stories, and I was going to... my story, by the way, is on my website. It's there, called Coming Home. I wrote it because many years ago I heard from 3 different people within the space of a month a story about how I became religious. Same story, and it was false. So I said to somebody, "What do I do about that?" He said, "You write it up and put it up. In that way, hopefully you can stop these false rumors from circulating." So I did that. Yeah.
Rabbi, I have a question. Okay, so we learned before that how about like if you have a Jewish father and you don't have a Jewish mother, now you're not Jewish, you want to convert, but but your father is Jewish, so does it mean that you didn't accept the Torah in your past life? And you need to convert, like you wanted to convert? Like how does that work?
You're raising a very interesting question. I know a little bit about it because let's start with the idea that we don't look to convert people. I've spoken about that in here because it's very hard to test their sincerity. If they want, then we put them through very rigorous tests and we reject them over and over again. And if they prove that they really are sincere, then we accept them as converts. Now, determining by birth who's Jewish goes by the mother and only the mother. What then about someone whose father is Jewish and mother is not? Is that person just non-Jew like every other non-Jew? Or would they have a different status because the father is Jewish? And there are those who indicate that they have a different status. I heard in the name of Yaakov Kamenetsky, one of the great American rabbis of the 20th century, that if someone who has a Jewish father and a non-Jewish mother approaches and talks about conversion, you don't go through the same very strict negative treatment that you would use for someone, both of whose parents are not Jewish. You don't push them off as much. You don't push them off as much. That's all I heard in his name. But there's a very interesting Rambam, Maimonides. When you have a set of laws, and they have different levels of status. In particular, violation carries with it different types of penalties. The Rambam says, don't assume that the more severe the penalty, the worse the crime. Don't assume that those two things correlate. Often they'll correlate, and sometimes they won't. And one of the examples that he gives is a Jewish man having relations with a non-Jewish woman. Casual relations, not marrying her. There are various opinions as to how serious a crime it is, but it's certainly on the low level of crimes in terms of punishment. The Rambam says it's a terrible crime. It's a tragic crime because his seed goes into the creation of a non-Jew. So I read that and I thought, so wait a second. And that means there's something identifiably Jewish in the ingredients of this non-Jew. Because the father, who's Jewish, his seed, his sperm with the DNA, right, is part of the building of this non-Jew. So I want to put two and two together. I could be wrong, but I want to put two and two together and say that there definitely is something different about a non-Jew whose father is Jewish. There's something there that's closer to becoming Jewish than a non-Jew, both of whose parents are not Jewish. So I think that there is definitely a difference between them, based on what I heard in the name of Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky, plus this observation. Now, how far that goes and what are the practical consequences, I'm not enough of an expert in this subject to say, but I think there is something separate that's going on there. Now, you're asking, the deeper Kabbalistic question. Why would divine providence arrange it this way? Is it that a previous time that soul was here, it failed in certain ways, now it's giving it a chance, and so on and so on? That's going way beyond what I'm capable of determining. So I'll just tell you that I can't say that anything is forbidden there because I just don't have enough information. But it's a very interesting thought, and I haven't heard it from many people. So I don't know how many people are concerned with it, but it is a very interesting thought. Okay, today we're going to talk about stories. So let's start with a Hasidic story and see where it takes us. One of the early Hasidim was called the Yehudi Pshischa, the Jew. I guess with 3 capital letters of the city of Pshischa. He was traveling once, he and some of his followers. They had to get to some destination, and they were supposed to be there for Shabbos, but they were delayed on the trip, and they ended up distant from the destination, and they found a Jew who ran an inn, which was a very common means of livelihood for Jews at that time, which meant that the food was kosher and the way the place was conducted in a kosher fashion. And he and his followers stayed there over Shabbos. They had a carriage that they were going in, so when Saturday night came, or the Shabbos came, they hitched up the carriage. He was impatient to go because he wanted to get to the place where he was going. So he was out by the carriage with his followers, and he called the innkeeper out, and he said to him, "Tell me how much I owe you. We spent Shabbos with you, so I can pay you because we need to go." And the innkeeper said, "You don't owe me anything. The fact that you were in my inn, the fact that I could watch you and observe you and be inspired by you, you don't owe me anything." Okay. He tried to push, but the innkeeper would refuse. So the Yehudi Pshischa said to him, "The least I can do then is to give your family a blessing. Call your family outside, and I'll give them a blessing." So he calls into the house, he calls his wife, he says, "Get the children, come outside." And they come outside, come walking to the place where he is, and the Yehudi starts to give his blessing, whereupon the innkeeper said, "No, wait a minute," because upstairs they had a daughter who couldn't walk. "Wait a minute, let me go up and get her, so she can have the blessing also." He turned and walked towards the door of the house, and the door opened, and she walked out to get the blessing. So, the story says, Yehudi Pshischa gave them all a blessing and left. When I read that story, it was collected by a certain person who was not totally reliable. I checked with my Rabbi, Zatzal. First I checked, shall I read them from there? He said, yes, but be critical. And I said, this story, the way it's told, makes it sound like Yehudi Pshischa didn't know that the daughter was upstairs. He didn't know there was a crippled child in the house. Which means he didn't daven, pray to God, do a mystical pass or some kind of magical influence in order to make her well. She just became well because he was there. That's the way it sounded to me. So I asked the Rabbi, could that such a thing be? And he says, yes, it could be. It could be. It means when you hear a story about a Rebbe which involves a miracle, and I'm not telling you what to believe, I'm not telling you how to approach these things, but for us, there's no embarrassment here. What? You believe in miracles? Yeah, wake up. It's also Thursday. Of course we believe in miracles. Miracles are foundational to the whole religion. And we believe in little ones also that happen to individual people, not only the splitting of the sea and the revelation at Sinai. But here, the question is, what's the point of the miracle? What is it supposed to accomplish? That supernatural things happen for us is trivial, but they never happen accidentally. They don't happen randomly. They happen for a purpose. What's the purpose of this where it's not done by the great man, it just happens in his vicinity? And the Rebbe Zatzal told me because it attracts attention to him. And because the Kodesh Baruch Hu wants him to attract attention. Because he wants people to look at him, to learn from him, to gravitate to him. He wants him to have an effect on them. That's one of the reasons why this sort of thing will happen. when I was living in Baltimore in the 1970s, they were making an expansion of the Beis Yaakov, the school for girls, and they were collecting money, and it was very hard. It was very hard. And at the same time, there was someone in the conservative movement, of which you can, I think I say OBM, was trying to build a new building. He went to one potential donor, walked out with $250,000, and he was finished fundraising. And the story got around. So they asked Rabbi Heinemann, who's been the postdoc in Baltimore for 50 years, how do you explain the fact that he was so successful and he did it in one effort, and we work and we go from place to place, and even the rabbis go from place to place. And he said, divine providence doesn't want him to have influence on many people. So he goes to one place and he gets it all and goes home. And when we go from place to place, Kodesh Baruch Hu wants us to interact with those people and have an effect on those people, and therefore we don't get it in one place. We go from place to place. So that's a question of looking at how you look at how the divine providence works and what its principles are, what its goals are. So let's go back. Here we have miracles happening in the vicinity of people to call attention to people so that people will come into interaction with them and be affected by them. Are there any personal qualities that people have, not miraculous, but personal qualities that people have which have a similar effect?
Enthusiasm.
Okay, enthusiasm. Okay, that definitely attracts certain types of people.
Placebo.
Say again?
Placebo effect.
I can't hear you.
Placebo effect.
Placebo effect?
Placebo.
Oh no, placebo effect is something else entirely. Placebo effect is where you believe that the thing that you're taking will help your condition, your medical condition, and in fact, because you believe it, it has an effect on your medical condition. Surprise, surprise, human beings, not just a very fancy automobile. Your mind, your thoughts, your ideas, your emotions, all of them are part of you, and they play a role in your health. And this has been documented many, many times, that when people believe that it's going to help, it actually helps more than otherwise. And that's why you have what in medicine what's called a double-blind experiment, where when you're trying to test whether a drug really helps, you give some people the drug, and some people you give the sugar pill, which they call the placebo, and you make sure that sometimes the doctor doesn't know which it is, in addition to the person taking the pill not knowing which it is, because otherwise, if the doctor thinks that it's really the pill, he expects it to work, and he expresses that confidence, and the patient picks up on the confidence, and then the placebo effect kicks in. So you've got to make sure that it doesn't. This has nothing to do with qualities that people have that attract other people to them. Now, you said enthusiasm. There is a word that's used often for people who are very attractive in this way. How about charisma? What's charisma?
Get people.
It gets to be. We have a word similar to that in Hebrew, which is chen. You look at the person and it's like a magnet. First of all, you're drawn to pay attention to the person. Second of all, usually you're drawn to want to, at least in some respects, be like that person. And third, if you have the ability, you want to be in the presence of the person. You want to interact with the person. Sometimes in English it's called charm. And these people, especially when they know that they have it, become leaders of various kinds. Whether political leaders or social leaders or fashion leaders or even in sports, they can attract certain type of devotion from the other players. If the quarterback has that charisma, the rest of the team is going to play differently because he's there. Now let's ask. Charisma is a word that's often used derogatorily or negatively. People are told, beware of him, he's very charismatic. What would you think? Is charisma something that's good or bad? Machlokes. You've learned some Jewish tricks. Right? You ask a question, you say it's a difference of opinion. There's a controversy about it. Well, it's true, controversy is very widespread in our sources. But I wasn't asking about our sources. I was asking just intuitively. This ability to charm people, to attract people.
It's good. That can be a threat as well.
Say again?
Can be a threat. Like if you speak about this person is very charming,
Yes.
you can also make other people cautious about the charm of this person. However, if you talk about his aura, for example, the aura is more like positive, if I may say. The charisma is like, be careful, he can play with that card. He has this magic trick, basically. He can play it on you. The aura is another thing, I think.
Aura, you say?
Aura, yeah.
Oh, that's something else. Okay, that could be an element in the charisma.
Yeah.
The aura could be an element of the charisma. But is it in a certain way, this question needs to be reformed also. Is it a good thing or a bad thing to have charisma?
It depends how you use it.
Okay, let's say it
Perception.
depends upon how you use it.
General good.
Depends upon how you use it. If you are trying to inspire people to do something that's worthwhile, valuable, especially if it's worthwhile and valuable for themselves, like eating a better diet, like exercising, like studying certain things, like acquiring certain psychological capabilities, and you have the charisma to draw people to you and you can inspire them, then it will be used to really benefit people. On the other hand, it seems like the great evil leaders of history, many of them had charisma, and people were drawn to them and drew them into great evil. I mean, Hitler, Yamach Shavo, was someone who apparently had a great deal of charisma and caused immense evil. So charisma is something which could be used either way. And this is fairly typical of the things in the world, that they could be used either for good or for bad. The idea that there are things that could be used for bad is a tricky idea, and it's off as an outlier, maybe at the bottom 1.5%. But the vast majority of things that HaKadosh Baruch Hu put into the world are things which could be used either way. And even if, without direction, without supervision, without management, they will be destructive, that doesn't mean they're irredeemably evil. It means that without supervision, they will be destructive, and therefore you have to use supervision. You must have heard that we divide up human motivation into Yetzer Tov and Yetzer Hara, good inclination, evil inclination. Well, evil inclination is a verse in the book of Genesis. It's part of the creation, part of what God created. Yetzer Lev Adam Ra Minu Orav. The Gemara says even its creator calls it evil. So that's a good enough authority to say that it's really evil. But what kind of evil is it? And what should we do about it? Let's take a person like some demonstrators in America who are smashing things. Smashing, burning. Compare that with a bull in a china shop. Now, you're probably too young to remember that phrase, but that was a phrase that used to describe for certain people who are destructive. What's the difference between someone who's smashing the window and burning down the building versus a bull at a china shop who's kicking over the china and smashing it? What's the difference?
It's the bull's nature.
Say again?
It's the bull's nature.
It's the bull's nature. What's the relationship of the bull to the smashing? Suppose the shop were empty. Suppose the shop didn't have any china in it. Would the bull act any differently? The bull's going through the shop. The bull doesn't care whether china gets smashed or not. The bull doesn't know what china is. It's just going. It's big, it's heavy, it's strong, something gets in the way, knocks it out of the way. Nothing in the way, it'll walk through it going without banging into anything. The human being wants to destroy. He's bent on destroying. His purpose is destroying. Both destroy, but they're not equal at all. They're not equal at all. The bull in the china shop, the owner should just put a harness on him and make sure he doesn't get into china shops. Put a plow on him, let him plow the field. Everything will be fine. he can be elevated. He can be used for a good purpose. Whereas those people, short of causing a revolution in their minds and hearts, there's nothing you can do with them except protect yourself from them in whatever way you find efficient. Now, man has an evil inclination. What is it like? Is it like the demonstrators, or is it like the bull in the china shop? What kind of evil are we talking about? You want to say something?
I was gonna say, like, what about like chimps, for example? Like I feel like if a chimp would be like walking in a china shop. It could be bent on destroying the china shop, or it could be like being like a regular. It could behave civilized while it's in a shop.
Let's see. I doubt very much that the chimp would want to break the dishes. I don't think there's anything in the repertoire.
Like if it was angry.
Well, I don't know, frankly, about chimpanzee behavior, whether they destroy things like take bananas and throw them in the river when they're angry, take the tools that they use for getting ants out of an anthill and break them up into pieces. I'm not aware that they do that. They fight, that they do. When they're angry with one another, they fight. But just to destroy things, I'm not aware of that. Certainly, and even if they did it, they would do it in a very superficial way. In other words, the demonstrator who breaks the glass and burns down the building does it because it belongs to them, and this is going to hurt them, and I want to hurt them. A chimpanzee wouldn't be doing that. He might be just in a rage, but there wouldn't be an intention to hurt certain people in a certain way in order to get at them because of their political actions and so on and so on. That's bizarre to read into a chimpanzee. So again, it's going to be on the level of blind behavior. It won't be dedicated to evil.
What about like people who like also get angry? They also like even punch a wall. They don't even break their hand.
I agree with you. There are people like that. In fact, that's what I want to talk about. That's exactly what I want to talk about, where it's not directed to evil, not specifically directed to evil. As he wants to punch the wall, and it turns out that there's a ceramic there, and by punching it, he destroys it. As far as his letting out his anger is concerned, he would have punched it with no ceramic. It just happens that he broke the ceramic. Then that person's action is just like the bull in the china shop. Now, our concept of the evil inclination that human being has is tied very much to the body, the physical body. The physical body is definitely the bull in the china shop. Let's take hunger. I'm hungry. What shall I eat? I want a sandwich. That is to say, my stomach wants a sandwich, and he'll be satisfied to have a sandwich. What day is today? I don't care. I'm hungry. I want a sandwich. Today could be June 5th, or it could be Yom Kippur. Wouldn't make any difference to my stomach. A fast day, a holy day, an average day, could be a holiday in which eating the sandwich might be a mitzvah. My stomach is oblivious. It just doesn't care. By the way, my stomach doesn't care whether it's my sandwich or your sandwich. I'm stealing it. My stomach doesn't care. The body is evil in the same sense as the bull in the china shop. It's morally and spiritually blind. And because it's morally and spiritually blind, it will do things that are destructive. It will also do things that are constructive. It will also do things that are neutral. It wants what it wants when it wants it, irrespective of the character of the thing that it does, whether it's good or bad or neutral. Well, that being the case, since it isn't dedicated to evil, there's a way of elevating it. First of all, I used to tell my students in the university, you talk about evolution producing in you certain needs, and therefore those needs are determined, although this is nonsense. If they're determined, you can't be responsible for them, and if you act them out, it's just the results of evolution, which you had no control over. And I told them, listen, your genes also affect what's above your neck. And above your neck is your brain. And the brain houses your mind, houses, isn't identical to, houses your mind. And your mind can make evaluations. And you could exercise your will to say no to what's below your neck. So evolution doesn't give you a free pass to just do whatever you feel like doing on the grounds that evolution programmed you to do it. So one of the things that you can do for the body is use your mind to be the eyes for the body. Let the mind determine when the body should act. That would be like putting an owner next to the bull in the china shop with an electric prod, which the bull can't ignore, to get him out. That's one way to neutralize the evil and the evil inclination. Then there's a higher level. As I said before, take the bull and use him to plow the ground. Then it's not just that he isn't breaking china, he's doing something good, he's doing something productive. And the body is like that. The body can be used to do something productive. When you say the Shema, we say, Yahavta Hashem Elokecha, you should love Hashem your God, b'chol levavcha, with all your heart. Now, in Hebrew, the word for heart is lev, lamed beis. Your heart ought to be libcha, with one base. And that word does appear in the Tanakh, libcha. But here it's spelled lamed beis beis chaf. Why is there an extra beis in the word? Say Chazal, because it means to teach you that you have two compartments, two elements in your heart, and you should learn to love God with both of them. So, love God with your good inclination, that's built in. To love God with your evil inclination, how do you do that? Well, you take the tendencies which are blind, morally and spiritually blind, and instead of using your mind to control them and stop them when they're wrong, find a way to use them when they're right. Find a way to harness them and use them when they're right. That's loving God with both of your inclinations. Now, I'll give you an example. Imagine Fred, Jewish boy, grows up on the wrong side of the tracks in Chicago. And there are youth gangs, as there are everywhere. And he fights his way to the top of the gang, because he's Jewish. I didn't say that. And he leads the gang in its exploits, some of which are pretty bitter. And then he gets to be 16, 17, he thinks, no future in this. What am I going to do? Go into trafficking heroin? That's the life I'm going to have? I don't know where to go. I don't know what to do. I'm going into the army. I'm going to spend 3 years in the army and try to find another way to live. And he gets in the discipline in the army, and they have courses in the army to study various kinds of sophisticated things to do for the army, and you can use them afterwards. After 3 years, he comes out and he says, I want to go into police work. And in particular, I want to be assigned to the police division that deals with youth crime, because I know that. Been there, done that. I know what they want. I know how they feel. I know what they're afraid of. I know what their hopes are. I can deal with them. I can use my experience as a leader of a youth gang to help youth gangs. That's not the same as becoming a librarian. If he becomes a librarian, he can have a constructive life. He won't be acting out what he used to do, but he won't be elevating it either. It's just sort of put in the closet and locked up. Here he's making positive use of it. So here's the example of something which something as deep as part of the human being, of every human being, which can be used for good or for bad. And that's the sense in which it's called bad. It's called bad because unmanaged it will do bad because of its moral and spiritual blindness. And managed, it can be something that actually contributes to the good. So that's the example that we gave of, we talked about charisma, and this is another example, and it's a general category. Well, let's go back to charisma. Let's add to it beauty. How about beauty? Isn't beauty attractive? Is beauty a good thing? Bad thing?
Depends how you use it.
Okay, so let's try saying it depends upon how you use it. As a matter of fact, the Torah does describe certain very great things as beautiful, like Joseph. And Esther is described as having chen, which we talked about before, charisma. And Jerusalem is described, klilas yofi, the greatest beauty. So apparently, beauty does have some positive feature. Now, there's a verse in Eshes Chayil. Eshes Chayil is the end of book of Proverbs. And as a famous verse says, Sheker achein v'hevel yofi, false is charm or charisma, empty is beauty. Isha yiras Hashem itis halal, a woman who has fear and awe for Hashem, she shall be praised. So you read that and you think, oh, there it is, black and white. The charm, the beauty are false and empty, and having awe and fear for Hashem, that will be praised. The Gaon of Vilna says, there's an implication here, that the charm, the charisma, and the beauty are false and empty when they don't accompany fearing Hashem. But when they do accompany fearing Hashem, they too shall be praised. The beauty and the charm will be praised. Which says black on white that beauty and charm can be positive. Why? Well, for one thing, let's go back to the way we described charisma. You look at a person with charisma, first of all, you're struck by what you see. And by the way, this can be totally unconscious. Some young children have it, 7-year-olds, boys or girls. Something about them that, when you look at them, you're riveted. You know, you're registering something. And when it's an expression, so that idea that being drawn, like the miracle that happened to the Yehuda B'Shischa, when you see that, it makes an impression on you. Now, if underneath that beauty is fear and awe of Hashem, then that will eventually reach you because of your connection to it. So that means that when we go through life, we who don't have it, but we interact with people who have it, it's not enough to say it's dangerous, turn your back because you don't want to be associated with people like that. What we have to do is ask, what's behind it? What's underneath it? What's motivating it? And if what's motivating it is something that's good and something that we should learn to be impressed by and emulate, then it's right to be affected by such people. Now, our leadership, historically, I think has a variety of different attitudes towards this idea. In the yeshiva world, I learned in some yeshivas, sometimes the great person, the greatest scholar, speaks very softly in a monotone. I remember being frustrated by the fact, since my Hebrew or Yiddish was so poor, I needed to hear every syllable, and it was very difficult. One of the reasons I was told is that they want their words to be heard and evaluated on the basis of their content only. No style. No style. Certainly no charisma. And there are Hasidic rabbis who speak that way also. They speak very slowly, very, very softly. You have to strain to hear it. There are other reasons also. You want people to make an effort to hear it. And by the way, speaking softly and causing people to make an effort to hear you is a standard psychological technique in great music, you have that also. There'll be fairly loud music, and then suddenly there'll be a passage that's extremely quiet, and you have to strain to hear it. And that's what the composer wants. He wants your attention, and he gets your attention not by overwhelming you with sound, but by forcing you to pay attention to hear what's being played. So that attitude is that charisma is not part of it. There are others who are great speakers and are used to inspire tens of thousands of people, and they do use charisma. But there, since the message and their character is one that it's right to be drawn to, the use of the charisma is positive. So you have this split between the two of them, the two attitudes. And it's a larger split. Again, in the yeshiva world, if you don't know how a yeshiva is structured, you don't know who it is, you walk in, let's say you go in to pray the afternoon service. Well, a lot of people there. Who's the leader? I don't know. I mean, maybe he's standing in front, but he's not the only one standing in front. How would you pick out the leader? The answer is you can't. You can't pick him out by his clothes. He dresses just like everybody else. You can't pick him out by his body motions. Doesn't move. Most don't move at all. Like my Rabbi didn't move at all. That's why I don't move at all. There's nothing visible about him to distinguish him. What distinguishes him is only what he knows and what he has to teach. That's all. Others don't do it that way. In the Sephardi world, the great rabbis dress in costumes, as you've probably seen. In the Hasidic world, they also dress in costumes that are different from everybody else and definitely stand out. The question is whether you're using a kind of charisma to rivet the attention of the people or not. When you see differences like this, don't ask which is right, which is wrong. Simply say there's a variety of strategies for interacting with different populations in order to benefit them as best possible. And then, because of a variety of strategies, and because Jews vote with their feet, this particular approach will attract the people for whom it's important, and this particular approach will attract the people for whom it's important. So we don't look at this as warring sects and schism and in the body politic and so forth and so on. We look at it as the creativity of the Jewish people to find ways to increase our commitment to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, our service of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and different people in different times, different circumstances need different types of approach. There's a story that when the Mir Yeshiva was in Shanghai, they fled from Europe, and they, as a whole, they went as a body, and they were in Shanghai. Shanghai's in China, and it was very hot, and of course they dressed in suits and so forth and so on. And the head of the yeshiva was there. It was Yom Kippur, and he stood for the whole of Yom Kippur, all 25 hours. Of course, didn't eat or drink anything. And they were sweating away because it was hot, and there weren't any fans, let alone air conditioning. And then came the end of Yom Kippur, and he was saying the evening prayer, and just standing there. And, okay, we haven't eaten for 25 hours. Or drunk for 25 hours. So finally, the yeshiva boys finished their prayers and went to get something to eat. And then came back to learn until he would finish his prayer so they could greet him after it was over. Instead of going home and collapsing and taking a shower and resting and so forth and so on, no, they came back. So when he finally finished it, turned around and saw them there and understood what had happened, he said, "You made my Yom Kippur. You made my Yom Kippur. To know that your thought was to be with me as best you could, and to share with me, and to appreciate what I was doing." And his charisma was just that he was standing there for 25 hours.
Did no one get any sleep? He was just standing?
Yes, Danita. You can go 25 hours without sleep. It is possible. Indeed, some great people like the Sapper Rabbi, he only went into a bed on Friday night. The rest of the time, he'd be sitting up the whole time. From time to time, he'd go like this for 5 minutes and then pick his head up. But he didn't sleep, a continuous sleep, except for Friday night. So that can be done. There are limits to sleep deprivation. The Russians did experiments to see whether people could live over long periods for 2 hours a night and so forth and so on. And what happened was that after 2 or 3 weeks, they started having hallucinations. I don't know what happened to us, but that's what they did. So they discovered that sleep is an organic need. But when you're, soldiers in battle can fight for 36 hours. Because if you don't fight, you're going to be dead. And that's a good motivator. That really keeps their attention. So, and for us, Yom Kippur is at least as important as a battle for your life. So not everybody can do it, but he can do it. By the way, I don't know how many of you have practiced Yom Kippur, or it's 25 hours without eating and drinking. I have seen anthropologists describe this with one of their fancy terminology called self-flagellation. Self-flagellation means that you beat yourself up on the grounds that you feel you have angered a supernatural power, and that supernatural power might penalize you and punish you, and so you punish yourself in hopes that the supernatural power won't punish you. And that anthropologists cited Yom Kippur as an example of self-flagellation. Well, I'm sure that he was never there, because the vast majority of Jews who go through Yom Kippur, I'm not talking about people with health problems, but healthy Jews, comes to the last hour of Yom Kippur, are not hungry and thirsty. They're not looking at their watch and say, 35 minutes to the Coke. That's not what's going on. The last prayer of the day is the most dramatic, called Ne'ilah, when the gates are being locked, and we have a chance to make our last plea to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and the congregation is riveted and galvanized and praying at the top of their lungs, and nobody is hungry and thirsty. Well, then it isn't self-flagellation. Hello, they're not suffering. They're not causing themselves to suffer in order to avoid the suffering that will be imposed upon them by a supernatural power. That's just not right. And when you read descriptions of the Jewish religion in such books, you have to be very, very suspicious. My first wife, took an anthropology religion course and had to read a book by a professor at Oxford, published by Oxford University, and here are two things that she quoted to me that he said. First of all, tefillin, that you wrap around your arms, that's Jewish snake worship. Oh, that's what you're thinking of when they put on tefillin. I'm wrapping a snake around my hand. Yeah, I love snakes, and so on and so on, right? That's only in the imagination of that professor. And the other thing he said was that Tanakh tells us when someone rebuilt Jericho, he shouldn't have done, it says he started the wall with his, his youngest son, and he ended it with his oldest son, or vice versa. And this professor at Oxford said, well, there was an ancient myth that if you wall up people in the wall, that would protect the city. And that's what it was talking about. Well, the poor fellow couldn't turn the pages back 5 chapters to where there was a curse put on anybody who will rebuild the city of Jericho, and the verse says his children will die. So this verse is saying that curse came true. No. It's a superstition of walling them up in the wall to protect the city. That's how much you can trust academic studies of religion. The ignorance is unconquerable. At any rate, so the idea here is that this charisma that these people have, they use it consciously. It's not something which they're in control of. No, because they don't always do it. They do it sometimes and other times. So it's a way of inspiring people. And sometimes, for certain people, as I said before, the lack of this charisma inspires a person. So all of this is examples of things which are things that can be used for good. it's very, very hard to find something which can't be used for good. I'll give you an example which might be a candidate, and we'll see how you feel about it. Let's say a Jew worships an idol, God forbid. The law is there's no rehabilitation for that idol. If a non-Jew worships an idol, there's a rehabilitation. If he re-announces it, then it can be utilized. Not as an idol, obviously, but for some other purpose. But if a Jew worships an idol, there's no way back. What does that mean? It means it has to be destroyed. It has to be burned. Now, shall I describe that as so it has no positive purpose? Is there any way in which you could avoid that description and what I just described?
No positive purpose.
Huh?
What does it mean, no positive purpose in the context?
Well, if I answer that question, I'll answer the question I asked also. No, I want you to use your... You want to say something?
Maybe it being destroyed is the positive.
Yeah, how about that? The very fact that you destroy it is its positive purpose. You express the abomination that it embodies, and you express your opposition to it by destroying it. That in itself is a positive purpose. It won't have any further positive purpose because you've destroyed it, but destroying it is also a positive purpose. So it's very, very hard to find something which really has no positive. Desta talks about such a category, but it's rare. It's rare. The vast majority of things the Kodesh Baruch Hu created to be used. And often the Torah gives us instructions how to use them. How to use them in a positive fashion. We spoke about this a couple of days ago, but I didn't mention this part of it, but this I'm going to quit. You want to get a child, we spoke about music. Remember we talked about doing something for a selfish motivation, and then you'll come to do it with a non-selfish motivation. So we said, why should you expect that to happen? And we said, like music. You teach the child to play an instrument for the first couple of years, you better give him some reward, because otherwise he's not going to do it. But when he starts playing music, you don't have to give him a reward anymore, because playing the music is itself its own reward. So what's the status of giving the reward? The status of giving the reward is doing something which really isn't worthy of the activity. Beethoven shouldn't need a reward. But to get to Beethoven requires a reward. And you give the reward in order to outgrow the reward. But then giving the reward is necessary. Because you won't get to outgrowing it until you have it in the first place. So it's necessary as a temporary crutch to lean on till your leg strengthens to the point where you can walk without a crutch. And the crutch is very good. It's very good. You just don't want to stay with the crutch for the rest of your life. So even the things which you want to outgrow, they are things which, in the meantime, can be serving a good purpose. That's the general attitude that we have towards the world in which we live and the capabilities that we are given. Questions? Okay. Have a wonderful Shabbos.